YouTube fellow community, George Martin fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about George Martin and his orchestra play Help, a very cool piece of Beatles history for a lot of Beatles fans that don't know. Maybe you do, but if you don't know, George Martin put out albums in the 60s and into the really early 70s, usually doing his own stuff with the Beatles, his own interpretations of Beatles work, because he was basically one of the fifth Beatles. And this album for me is fascinating just for the release of it, let alone how good it is. The story behind it, trying to figure out the pieces, that's the most confusing part. This was released on September 6, 1965, and then November 19th in England. So it came out in America first, and the cover is different. The British cover has him at the piano, the American cover has the Beatles on it because that's going to be way more eye-catching. They do put a picture of George at the very top and the back. Here's the thing. So, here's where it gets crazy. Help came out in August of 65. The actual album came out in August of 65. And they were recording Help mostly throughout February. They get a good chunk of it done in February. And then bits and pieces throughout March, May, and June. June being where Yesterday was done. And then literally a week after Yesterday was done, press releases went to EMI saying, here's what the track list for the album is going to be with the actual song names. Now, the reason I say that is because on the back of this album, you have Auntie Gin's theme, That's a Nice Hat, and Scrambled Egg. So, these were the working titles of those songs by the Beatles. Scrambled Egg being Yesterday, That's a Nice Hat being It's Only Love, and Auntie Jean's theme being I've Just Seen a Face. Here's where it gets interesting. When did George Martin have time to record this thing? From what I could figure out, he was doing this probably in April or May of 1965. That way, those working titles would have been the song titles at that time. He probably recorded this thing at that time, got everything set up for copyrights and all that stuff with the working titles, and that's why it got stuck that way. Because this came out after Help, so you would think, well, wouldn't the actual track list be the actual names? Not really, unless he went through all the paperwork to get things put together, and he had this sitting in the can, waiting for the Beatles project to come out first, then he would put out this one. So that's probably what happened. I would think he was probably using Studio 1 at EMI because that was sort of the big orchestral room. Studio 2 is where the Beatles did all their stuff. This did come out in both mono and stereo. This happens to be a mono copy through United Artists, who put out the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. It's a really great, fun listen. I have to admit, I've played it a bunch of times. I've had this thing for years, and it's one of those things where I was like, I'll put it on someday. And that someday showed up, and I'm all the better for it. It's a really great album because the cool thing about the Beatles' music is that they have such a fantastic song structure, pop construction, how to write songs, and they use chords that put them together so well that you can take those arrangements and kind of mess with it and still come up with a really great song. You don't have to follow exactly what they did. A great point being Macklemore Ave by Booker T and the MGs, one of the best albums ever made. They take Abbey Road and do it their own way, and it sounds fantastic. The cool thing about this album is that, yeah, there's definitely a lot of big orchestral kind of things on here, but there's also some more quaint, almost bossa nova feels on this album too. So George kind of goes all over the place with his influences and his technique to show off his skills as an arranger, and it's so cool. It starts off with Help, a super jazzy, almost Vince Guaraldi type of jazz on this one, so it's not sounding like the Peanuts cartoons. Really shuffly drums, good flutes, good oboes, heavy toms, very Latin infused. It's a very fun sounding song, and he does take a couple liberties with the bridge. He kind of goes into his own place a little bit here and there, but really a fun opener. Another Girl, I love how the harmonica sings the verses. That's super cool. The strings will do the chorus vocals. Pretty faithful to the original. Definitely kind of a peppy, sentimental kind of song, but just an enjoyable listen, really. You're Gonna Lose That Girl, big brass arrangements on this one, big string accents, awesome punctual drums, just a bombastic kind of song, and it really fits well for those chords. I Need You from George, the harmonica sings the vocals on this one again. Not too different from the original, I have to admit. It's not too different, but it's just enough to be like, that's a nice, easy listening, George, you know? And The Night Before, just a really cool Herb Alpert style rock guitar, that kind of thin sounding guitar. You know, pretty faithful to the original as well, but the bridge section is warm, slightly different octave maybe for the guitar parts. Sometimes my vocabulary for describing music isn't the best, but definitely a good listen. And side 2 starts off with Ticket to Ride, and again, pretty faithful, but like the big strings in the chorus give it a whole different feel. Kind of a joyous and bouncy expression, which the song does have that naturally, but it works really well for a sort of bombastic orchestral experiment. I like it a lot. Auntie Jen's theme, bluegrass and orchestra kind of feel in the beginning, and then some cool acoustic guitars doing a run. It works so well in this arrangement. It's amazing how you can take a Beatles song and change the instruments and get almost a different song out of it, but it still feels really good at the same time. That's a Nice Hat. It's Only Love is what this song is. Works really well with those strings singing the chorus. The verse is done by maybe a harpsichord. I can't figure out what instrument that is. Maybe it's a guitar, but there's a little coda at the end too, which I think is nice. Tell Me What You See is kind of an unusual pick, but I do like it. This is the one that has that slight bossa nova feel to it. And the drums sound a lot like Ringo's playing, like almost to a T. At first I was like, wait, they just took the drum track from the actual song, but they didn't. It's definitely, there's slight differences. Believe me, I've been hearing this song for a million years. I'm a drummer. I've studied Ringo. There's slight differences that make it sound a little different, but the organ is the exact same organ that they use in the actual Beatles song, so that's kind of cool. And then Scrambled Egg, which is Yesterday. Really enjoyed this one. A very calm, oboe-led kind of song. The strings creep in. Definitely a sweeping feel in the chorus. Really gorgeous ending. Kind of a nice, sweet way to close out the LP. But here's the back cover here, and I cannot stress how interesting it is trying to figure out when this album was done, because I scoured through every Beatle book I have. I went through every note I could find. The internet has close to nothing about this thing besides that it was released. But from what I could figure out, he probably recorded it in May or April and submitted it, and because the working titles were all that he had, went with that. So just a fantastic release. It's really, really cool. And let me show you the actual album here. On the United Artists label. I always liked that label. I thought it was kind of cool. So there you go. George Martin and his orchestra perform Help. A really fun listen. Definitely if you're a Beatles fan, check it out. If you're a George Martin fan, check it out. It won't disappoint you. A lot of people kind of have that sort of blasé attitude to like orchestral covers of Beatles stuff. This isn't really like that. There's definitely moments of orchestral pieces happening, but there's so much more. And I feel like you get a really good sense of George's layering and his idea of song structure and how to, put together a song. It's fun to listen to, so I highly recommend it. If you can find a copy, pick it up. It's not streaming on Spotify or anything, so maybe it was on CD. I don't know if it's ever been on CD, but if you find a copy on album, on LP, on vinyl, check it out. But that's it. Easily like an 8 out of 10 for me. I think it's really cool, and I'm giving it a slightly high score too because just the history of it. There's so much of a mystery here. I would love to go to EMI and just look through the vaults and see when this thing was done and how long it took. George was really good at composing some things on the spot, so they may have done this thing in a couple of days. It may have been a pretty quick album to make, but yeah, I would love to know more about when this was done, who played on it, the whole 9 yards. I'd really like to know more. So if you do know more about this release, please let me know in the comments below. Inform all of us what you know, because it's worth seeking out. It really, really is. That's it. My name is Giggens. This has been George Martin and his orchestra play Help, and 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.